Hopefully you can all see a yellow screen in front of your team. And as I say, good afternoon. My name is Ross Coupland. I'm from Stamford College, and really excited to share some of our findings from our action research today. And I think before I do, it's been really interesting being a part of these presentations today. There's definitely a theme, isn't there? Okay, and I'm sure you can see that in the title that I've got there as well. So this represents the second year of action research for our network, and it was a great opportunity to continue the foundation of knowledge that we had developed last academic year. So we were working around blended teaching and learning opportunities through the use of interactive math software, and our aim is there for you as well. And we were really trying to improve our understanding of a range of the key concepts that our students often struggle with in GCSE maths, by introducing blended teaching and learning opportunities through maths software. Before we begin though, quick starter for 10. Well, I'm sure you can even do this within 10 seconds. I'd like you to think in your minds or scribble down on a piece of scrap paper, what are the top 3 topics that your students find challenging in maths? Now, for context, this was a question on our survey, and we'll be discussing these findings later. But just in your mind or just on a bit of scrap paper, I'll just give you 10 more seconds. What would you say are the top 3 topics your students struggle with? So let's have a look at the software that we were using. As you've likely noticed, the market continues to grow when it comes to interactive math software. From my perspective, it seems that I seem to get some adverts or emails or contact almost on a monthly basis from new technological startups that are trying to break into this market that is just growing and growing and growing. And I'm sure you recognize some of the platforms that we've been working with here. So at Stamford College, we've worked with GCSE Pod, along with City College Peterborough. The College of West Anglia continue to use their Learn platform, which is based on the Moodle platform. Peterborough College continued with MathsWatch. Grantham College and Moulton College were working with Century Tech. And it's interesting to note that for 4 of these colleges, this is a continuation. So it's the second year of implementation of this software, which could throw an interesting insight into the results that we're going to discuss. Interestingly, one of the key network benefits that we found here was that we could have very quick interventions as a teaching team. We could discuss any barriers that we were facing. We could identify trends that were occurring, and we were already at a very early stage starting to identify potential strengths and weaknesses to each pieces of these software. So how did we collect our data? The main source of information was a survey that we were going to run, and with support and guidance, we decided to run them over 2 timeframes. So research window 1 began in October 2020, and the second research window in March 2021, and that allowed us to gather a vast amount of information, really, of qualitative and quantitative data from over 300 students. As you saw, 6 colleges took part, and approximately 11 lecturers were involved. And together we were able to issue our survey via a Google form or on paper to try and accommodate a range of students and ensure that we were capturing as much data and information as possible. Combined with monthly reflections from our tutors, we were then able to take this further and try and identify context and trends. As expected, there was some disruption with our second survey in March 21, most likely due to the confusion and ongoing disruption of colleges reopening after the January 2021 lockdown. However, as you'll see shortly, we still managed to capture a valuable data set that we are going to take forward. So in summary, what sort of results were we able to find and identify? Well, from the data, interestingly, it seems that student confidence in their math skills appeared to increase between those 2 timeframes. That in itself was a bit of a surprise. Equally, student confidence in using computers to learn maths appears to increase. Now, is there a link between the 2? That's something that we look to find out and investigate. And equally, the software itself, the perceived effectiveness increased according to the students. And very interestingly, those topics that students felt they needed supported was not only common across all 6 colleges that took part in this action research, there was little change between the 2 surveys of October 2020 and March 2021. So what does that look for us in a bit more detail? So what you should have on your screens there are 2 charts, one on the left that talks about the average confidence scores in students' maths ability, and the one on the right hand side talks about average student confidence on a scale of 1 to 5 in using computers. Now, what's really interesting to note is that firstly, we can see a positive increase with every college, with each data set between those 2 windows. So your dark blue there is survey 1, October 2020, and the orange that you can see is survey 2, March 2021. And although there is a very slight increase in some cases, it's interesting to note that the students appear to show an increased confidence in their maths ability between those 2 timeframes. Now, bearing in mind that we had the January lockdown, bearing in mind that we had the confirmation that summer exams were going to be cancelled, and bearing in mind that return to college way back in September 2020 was itself quite a confusing time for students, that's quite a surprising result for our data set. And to see that across all 6 colleges is something that requires a little bit more investigation. Equally, if we take College 6 as an example that saw the most significant increase between those 2 timeframes, more discussion and investigation will be required as part of our next research cycle to find out what actually happened. But just to see that itself was interesting. And the same applies to the chart on your right there, team. Okay, so the average student confidence on a scale of 1 to 5 in using computers, just using computers and computer software to learn maths between those 2 timeframes appears to have increased their student confidence. Again, the fact that we are seeing this across all 6 colleges, regardless of the type of software used, seems to suggest that we are having some form of success in integrating this interactive math software into our teaching styles. And though it's interesting, we would probably expect the majority of students to have some form of proficiency in using computers. We are well aware that not all students enjoy using IT to learn, certainly maths. The chart above there represents on a scale of 1 to 5 how effective students judged the math software that they were using to learn and progress in maths. And the table below is just in numerical format for you. So as you can see, we were taking the mean averages for each of the colleges between those 2 timeframes of October 20 and March 21, and then you can see a mean average difference increase. Again, although slight in some cases, students have judged the math software to help them improve and learn and develop their progression and confidence in maths, which again suggests that for our next research cycle, we really need to get into and understand the nuances of this software. As mentioned a few minutes ago, many pieces of this software is now in its 2nd year of development with us. So it could be the fact that not just the teaching team, possibly some students themselves, have more familiarity and understanding of some of the more technical and advanced aspects of this software. So those challenging topics, I wonder what you did select. Let's see if they match up with what our students put forward. Now, as a headline, we can say that though those expected topics did feature in those surveys, as a network, we expected more variation between the 2 survey windows. So let's have a look at that. I've color-coded it just to help make things a little bit more straightforward. So what you've got in the middle of your screens there is the results from October 20. How many of you put fractions? Hopefully a lot of you did. I'm sure you probably did. Ratio also features high. Algebra is also there as well. And then we've got a little bit of a mix, but percentages also features in 4 of the 6. But it's the fractions that really got us really interested there. And look at this. Here's the information for March 21. Fractions still features, okay? Algebra still features. Ratio still features quite near the top. After we have gone through our scheme of learning, after we have gone through our teaching and our lessons and all the extra support that we've put in, those students still recognize or state that those are their topics that they still find challenging, the topics that they still find supporting, the topics that they still find difficult. And there's a lot to think about here. There's a lot to unpack, actually, because it's really going to help us form our next steps. But as a surprising piece of information, we've got students saying they feel that their confidence in maths has increased. We've got students saying that they feel that using computers has supported them in developing their maths confidence. We've got students saying that they specifically felt that the software itself was helping them support their maths confidence. And yet those topics that students find difficult feature in October and in March. So how does that help us with our conclusions? Well, based on the reflections and the data that we've received, it appears that tutors and students have responded well to the consistency, to the platform of an accessible piece of software during what's been a very challenging year, when there has been disruption to online and on-site classes. And one of the key things that many student comments are telling us is that using computers and math software is an incredibly fine balance to ensure that all learners are engaged and supported, with a variety of implications and factors, digital deprivation just being one example. And the conclusions help us with our next steps. So we can clearly see that further investigation is required. Why is it those topics are consistent across colleges in the academic year? And something that has been flagged up to us is, are they emotional responses? Is fractions just a very easy topic for students to throw out after having years and years and years of fractions-based teaching, and perhaps they've still not got it? What are those aspects within fractions? And that's going to be our building blocks for next time. And it really is that student confidence. I've seen it in so many presentations today already, that if we can get student confidence and engagement, regardless of whether it's an online lesson, an on-site session, or a piece of math software, we are hoping to provide them with something that they can develop their confidence to tackle those questions. I'm sure you've all got those students that will look at multi-step questions in their exams and say, well, I didn't answer that because I didn't know what I'm doing. And what we're trying to do is unlock that potential in them to maybe attempt and secure 1 or 2 marks in some of those more difficult questions. And here we are looking at the next steps. So we are looking to continue using interactive math software as we transition back into classrooms. Students seem to have responded well to the consistency, as I've mentioned before. So as they transition it back into the classrooms, which could be a really difficult time for some students in terms of managing their anxiety, the social aspects of returning to a college site is something that's going to be really fascinating for us. This is very much, it's in the zeitgeist, isn't it? This is very much a moment where we are going to see a change as we return in September, and how we as teachers and how our students adapt to it is going to be really interesting. And we're also going to continue working with the software in more detail to look at the more advanced elements and find out how we can really maximize what we want to do. And as I've mentioned, we also plan to investigate why those top topics feature in an academic year and get more information as to why those are the key elements and what can we do to support. Our blended learning opportunities continue, and we will continue working with our support specialists as part of CPD. And as you're probably aware, we are looking to work towards a more mastery-based approach as part of our action research throughout 21 and 22, so we can marry those 2 elements together to really maximize what our students do with us. And as and when they're released, our network, we've committed to analysing our tutor assessed grades and trying to identify what elements we can pull from there, what trends can we spot, and how can we pull that forward. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you to our huge network of colleges that took part and played such a big part in this information, and the specialist support from the likes of Sheila Evans, Norma Honey, Marie Joubert, Kath Gladden, Steve Pardo, the ETF, and many others that I don't have time to mention right now. Any questions, team? Thank you very much for your time and attention.